This course is presented to you free of charge by TTJ Tech Services of www.ttjtech.biz and by Stir It Up of www.stiritup.com. And remember, Stir is spelled with a U, not an I, so that's STURITUP.com. TTJ Tech Services and Stir It Up are pleased to offer this course to you to the glory of God and to the benefit of all those who listen. Well, praise God. And my friends, welcome once again to session number 4 of Voiceover In and Out, where we are going to talk today all about the Apple account and iCloud. Before we can really delve into these apps and all of the wonderful features and functionality of your iPhones, we need to make sure that your Apple account is set up properly and that you even have an Apple account. Now, we need to talk about Apple accounts and iCloud today because iCloud is such a core part. It's an integral part, really, of the entire Apple ecosystem, as we often refer to it. And it is part of how everything works together so beautifully. And it's really part, in my opinion, of what makes Apple devices so awesome and so unique and so powerful. For starters, let's just delve right into this. If you are a longtime customer, a longtime student, a longtime Apple user, you are familiar with the term Apple ID. Well, the term Apple ID is still sort of there. You can find it in some documentation and some places, but by and large, the term Apple ID has been replaced with the term Apple account. And so when you hear me say Apple account, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about your Apple ID, but again, now we're more often using the term Apple account. And if you look in your settings, you're going to see that term Apple account as well. So what is an Apple ID or an Apple account? Well, it is the gateway to all things Apple. It is how you access everything about Apple. You can sign in to your Apple account and access anything from the Apple Store, where you make purchases of new iPads and iPhones and Apple TVs and Apple Watches and so on. Anything from that to accessing your documents, your photos, your music and TV shows and movies, and so much more. And we're going to go through a lot of that with iCloud today. But just understand that you really, really need an Apple account to get the most out of your devices. Some of you who have, watched TV, and I think it was probably in the early to mid 90s, and maybe even a little beyond that, they used to have these Tic Tac commercials on TV. And they would jokingly say, because, the Tic Tac is the breath freshener kind of thing, and they would jokingly say on there, "Can you breathe without a Tic Tac?" And she said, "Of course, but I wouldn't recommend it." Well, it's kind of the same, can you use an Apple device without an Apple account? Well, yeah, technically you can, but I certainly would not recommend it. The Apple account is going to make it possible for you to do just about anything that you want to do, and it's really necessary for almost everything, even going so far as to collaborate with other people, working together on documents or sharing photos in a shared album, and all of these kinds of things that we're going to learn, many of which we're going to learn how to do in this class, and some of which are reserved for other classes that we offer for free or in some cases paid. But nevertheless, you're going to learn about the vast majority of it, but you've got to have an Apple account in order to get started. Most of you, I would venture to say, especially our longtime students, you probably already do have an Apple account. If you are a brand new iPhone user, then I don't know if you have one or not. But let's take this to the extreme. Let's suppose you've never, ever used an Apple device until now. This is your very first Apple device ever, and your first experience with Apple at all. You probably don't have an Apple account, so you have to set it up. And when you're setting up your device, you actually have the opportunity to set it up you can set up your Apple account during the device setup process. If you miss that opportunity or you choose not to do it, you can go into settings on your device and you can set it up later. Now, there might be some who are, let's say, for example, PC users, and they're not yet comfortable accessing websites and forms and so on their iPhone, in which case it is possible to go to a website on your PC and set up your Apple account. Now, I believe the website is still appleid.apple.com, even though they call it an Apple account. I think that's still the website. So again, that's the word appleid.apple.com. You don't need to go there if you already have an Apple account. This is only for those people who have not set one up and who may be not comfortable doing it on their iPhones yet. It is entirely possible to do the whole process on your iPhone from settings. But if you've never done it and you're not comfortable with that yet, you could do it that other way and go to the website, appleid.apple.com. What it's going to ask you for is an email address. And you have kind of two choices. And for our longtime students, I know this is not always the way it was, but this is the way it is now. It's so much easier. So you have two choices. You can use an existing email address that you already have as your Apple account email if you want to do that. If you've already got an established email account, let's say with Gmail, for example, or with your internet service provider, you can use that as your Apple account email address. The other option you have is to create a brand new email address at iCloud.com and make that your Apple account email address. There is also a third option, which is to start out by using your existing email account. Let's say, again, Comcast, Gmail, Yahoo, Outlook, whatever. You have an email address. You can start out with that. And then you can add an iCloud email address at no cost later whenever you want to start using iCloud Mail. You don't have to do it right away. You can do it later, and they'll be tied together, and you can use them interchangeably. No longer do we have to worry about, this is the one I have to sign in with, and no, it doesn't matter anymore. As long as they're tied together, they function exactly the same. You can switch which one is the primary one, and the only thing that really means, making one the primary one, is that's what other people are going to see when you communicate with them through your Apple devices. But it makes no difference. I've got probably 7 different, I'd have to actually double check what it says, but I think it's 7. I've got like 7, maybe even 9 email addresses that I can sign into my Apple devices with. My primary Apple account, which actually happens to be a Comcast address because back then that's how we did it. Then I have an iCloud one. I have a couple of other alias iCloud email addresses. I have domain email addresses, and some of you don't even know what all of that is right now, and that's okay. But I'm just saying it's very easy. Everything's interchangeable, and you don't really have to overthink this. So you use whatever you want to use as long as it's available as your Apple account, and that is how you'll sign in. You'll have an Apple account email address and a password, and we definitely suggest strong passwords, but that's something we'll talk about in a later session. So now you have your Apple account, and you'll fill out all the information if you've never done this before, and you'll get started, and now you're ready to go. So anytime now that you're asked for your Apple account, you can, or if it still says Apple ID in some places, that's what you're going to use then. You'll use that email address, that password, and that is your gateway to everything. You can have one Apple account per person for as many devices as you have. And again, if you need additional Apple account email addresses later, that's totally doable through a variety of means. But the whole idea nowadays is one Apple account email address per person. And that's all you need. You don't have to have different ones for different things. If you are a student who for some reason already does have multiple ones, then, we can talk later. There are ways of, in some cases, sort of merging some of that. And then in other cases, not so much. You just have to use both. But it really just depends on your circumstances. And it's not something I want to get into here for the sake of time. But it just know that the way that it really works best is one Apple account per person, regardless of how many devices you have and regardless of Whether you need additional email addresses to work with Apple, you can do that later. If you have multiple people in the family, there's a feature called family sharing that we'll talk about here in a little bit that allows each person to use their own Apple account, but then kind of combine some of the features of these Apple accounts in a way that makes them shareable within the family. So we'll talk about that more in a few minutes also. Now, one of the most important components to all of this that you will get access to when you create an Apple account or sign in with your existing Apple account is that you will gain access to iCloud. And I want to talk a little bit about the iCloud set of features. We used to be able to sort of quantify this into a small list or a relatively small but sort of big list. But honestly, it has grown leaps and bounds in even the past few years. And so we used to try to define this when Steve Jobs first stood on stage in the last keynote address that he ever gave. Um, he he spoke of iCloud in this way. He said iCloud stores your content and then wirelessly pushes it to all of your devices. It is built right into your apps, so there's nothing else to do. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but you just sign in with iCloud and then you have access to all these features. And it's wirelessly, automatically. He really stressed that. I think that definition is still accurate, but I think now looking, what is it, like 13 years since iCloud has been introduced, I think the definition probably doesn't even do it justice, because iCloud truly is the core of what makes, I mean, it's not the only thing, but it's one of the things that makes the Apple devices so special.
But if you remember, Matt, it wasn't always iCloud. Remember, it was Mobile Me, and then when it was available to the public for free, it was at Me, and then I think it was 2012 or maybe 13 is when they implemented the iCloud.com domain.
Yeah, it really did go back to the whole history of that. It actually started out before you and I were ever even in the Apple ecosystem. It was called iTools, and it was a whole, a suite of a set of features that, slowly kind of evolved into Mobile Me, which was a paid service. And then it was after Mobile Me, it was actually 2011, and that was when he introduced iCloud. And it was, it's begun to, ever since then, it has just grown, and it's truly incredible, almost. And I'll say this um with a bit of a grain of salt, but almost every major platform has some sort of cloud service. And the reason I say it's with a grain of salt is because I don't think any of them compare to iCloud as far as how good they are or how robust they are, but they do exist, in fairness, right? So Google has its cloud services. They don't really market them quite the same way. I don't think I've ever heard G Cloud or anything, but they do. They have cloud services that they sync things across. Microsoft has its OneDrive, which is a small part of, but iCloud is that and so much more, right? This is the scenario that we want to think about if we want to really understand what iCloud is in a nutshell. And even this doesn't do it justice, but let me just say this. iCloud is basically, can be summed up as all of your stuff, everything that matters to you digitally, being available on all of your devices, no matter where you go, no matter where you are. And what's more, all of the devices being able to work together to meet your needs. And we at TTJ and Stir It Up, we have a term that we like to use called the connected digital life, which is that same idea that everything is working together, whether it's your smart home, whether it's your iPhone, your Apple Watch, whether it's even in your car, right? It is almost as if these devices are anticipating your needs. But the thing is, it's the way that they work together. And I'm going to give you some very, very practical examples of this, so it's not quite so theoretical here in a second, right? And I'll actually explain it. I'm not going to go through every single feature. Number one, I'm sure that I would forget some because there are so many now. There may be even some that I don't even realize or think about, right? And also, it would take way too long. So I'm not going to go through every feature. I don't expect you to remember every feature, but I want to just give you some ideas of the kinds of things that we are talking about that we can do with iCloud. And that way you can understand the importance of this and the significance of it. So let's start with some very, very simple stuff. Let's say that I have an iPhone and an Apple Watch and an iPad and maybe some other devices like an Apple TV and HomePod and so on. But let's just, I open up my iPhone and I want to create an event on the calendar because I'm going to go out to lunch with somebody, or I have a meeting that I need to go to, and I'm going to put this on the calendar. Well, what's really nice is that when I add this event to my calendar on my iPhone, it immediately becomes available on the calendar on my iPad as well, on the calendar on my Apple Watch, on the HomePod. I can literally speak to my HomePod. For those who don't know, that's Apple's smart speaker. Okay. And I can literally speak to my HomePod and say, what's on my calendar? And she'll tell me because I put it on my iPhone. Or if I put it on my iPad, it doesn't matter. Whatever device I put it on, it syncs wirelessly, automatically, instantly to all of my devices. If I delete something, if I edit something, it is the same thing. It's just almost instant, and it's all of the devices wirelessly, as long as my devices are connected to the internet, either through Wi-Fi or cellular or whatever. They will have that information. It will be synced. It will be up to date as long as I'm signed in to the same Apple account. And this is true for calendars. It's true for reminders. It's true for notes. It's true for documents now. So if we create a document in Pages, for example, the word processing and desktop publishing app, we actually can save that to iCloud, which usually it does by default anyway, but we make sure we save it to the iCloud drive, and it's going to be available on all devices. And I didn't even include the Mac yet, but it's available on the Mac as well. All of these things are available on all the devices. So, if you're used to using computers back in the 90s or early 2000s even, you were always thinking to yourself, do I have the correct jump drive? Remember the flash drive things, and this, or do I have, is this the right, and then you wouldn't be able to show, let's say you went out to dinner and wanted to show somebody something you were working on, and you say, well, I forgot that was on a different drive or on a different CD. I don't have that with me. I'm going to have to do it next time. Well, those days are gone. You don't have to worry about that. It doesn't matter which device. So I have an iPhone. Praise God, I have two iPads, an iPad Pro that I'm using right now, and also an iPad Air. And I have a Mac, and then, some Apple TVs and some other things, right? The watch, the HomePods. But it does not matter which device I pick up. I can literally pick up any of my devices, and all of the stuff is there on all of the devices. Now, this also extends to things like photos. You can use iCloud to store all of your photos. And when you do that, again, same thing. Take a photo on one device, it's available on all of the devices. Edit a photo or a video on one device, the edits apply to all of the devices. These things are across the board, all devices. Now, some things like photos, the syncing is automatic, it is wireless. It may not be instant. There are some caveats to, for example, photos, because especially with videos, they can be so large. Some things won't sync until your device is sleeping or locked, or at least plugged in to power. Sometimes if the device gets too hot, it'll say syncing paused, but it'll resume. It will happen. It just might be a few minutes, or maybe in extreme cases, a few hours instead of a few seconds, but that's rare. But I mean, it does. It automatically syncs. And then not only do you have automatic syncing of photos and videos, but you can also use iCloud to create shared albums, shared photo albums that you can share with your family, with your friends, with your coworkers, multiple albums, multiple groups of people. I mean, it just that the possibilities are almost endless. So this even allows me to have my photos on my Apple TV, which, for those who don't know, an Apple TV is not a television. It's a set-top box that connects to your television. And it is immediately possible when I sign into my Apple TV to access all my photos. And so I don't have to sync them. I don't have to download them. I don't have to transfer them. I just open the Photos app. It'll say, in so many words, do you want to use iCloud photos? Yes, I do. And then sure enough, they start showing up. Again, might take a few minutes depending on the speed of my internet connection and how many photos and videos I have, of course. But they'll show up. And so you don't have to do anything else. You don't have to configure this stuff. Well, you have to configure it initially just by making sure that it's enabled, making sure that you're signed in. But I don't have to go in there and say, okay, I want to sync these today and I want to do that. No, it's just automatic. It just happens for you. And so it is the world that we live in now where all of our stuff is available on all of our devices. And if we find that we are using a device that doesn't belong to us, maybe a computer that we're using that is at a public, I mean, you don't even see that much anymore because people bring their own devices, but occasionally maybe you run into a place, a coffee shop or a library that has a public computer. You can actually use iCloud.com and you can sign in and access many of these same features even on iCloud.com on the web. And that is accessible with some screen readers, not all, but some. And so that's even another option that you have. Now that in and of itself probably sounds pretty amazing, and it should, because it is. But that is not even close to the full story, because there's so much more. iCloud is a very major part of the ability for you to, for example, purchase an app on one device and re-download it on any other device that you have that's signed into the same Apple account, and re-download it for free, by the way, even if it's a purchased app, right? So we can download apps on multiple devices, and as long as the app remains available, we can continue to download that years later, even on new devices that we may get. We also can do the same thing with purchased TV shows and movies. Really, we don't even have to download those because they'll stream, but basically you can download them for offline if you want. And again, you can do this on multiple devices. I think there's a limit of 10 like iPhone, iPad, and Mac devices, maybe, with the media like music and shows and so forth. At least there used to be. But Apple TVs don't seem to count against that necessarily. So you can do this on as many devices as you want. And that's really cool because if I purchase a movie or a show, I know we're not purchasing all that much anymore comparatively. I shouldn't, that probably is a false representation. We make a lot of movie and show purchases still, but we're doing a lot more streaming now, right? Like we just sign up for Disney Plus or Peacock or Max or Paramount Plus or Prime or whatever, and we stream our movies and shows. But maybe there's something you want to purchase from Apple because you want to own it for yourself, or maybe it's not available on a streaming service yet, but Apple has it available to buy. Plus you get the iTunes extras, they call them, which are like the DVD bonus content of yesteryear, right? So maybe I want to purchase my favorite movie or my favorite show, so I have the whole series, and so when I purchase this, it does not matter which device I purchase it on because it is going to be available on all of my devices anytime to watch. And again, because I can stream movies and TV shows, I don't even have to download it first. I can simply go in there, I can see it, I can watch it. And I can even start watching it on one device and I can resume it later on another, start it in the living room, continue it in the kitchen or the bedroom or whatever. And so this is the portion of that. Now that also applies to purchased music, but we certainly are not purchasing music as much as we used to because we also have Apple Music now. And Apple Music, of course, is Apple's streaming music service. There are lots of those out there. Apple Music is my favorite. They've got millions and millions of songs, and you can just listen to them once you are a paid Apple Music subscriber or even on a free trial. And you can listen to anything you want. You can listen to albums, individual songs, and we're going to demonstrate some of this later in the course. But iCloud is integrated with that as well because, for example, if you make a playlist on one device, that playlist is available on all of your devices in the music app. And if somebody shares a playlist with you, That's also something that can be done. And then you have what's known as the iCloud music library. I think they still use that term, but basically, this means that all of your music, whether you did get it by listening to it on Apple Music, or whether you purchased it, or whether you imported it from a CD, maybe you still had a few old CDs you brought in there, or you downloaded it from some other source. We are not condoning or condemning different ways of getting your music. This is not a legal law course, right? Some of the stuff's legal and some of it's not, but no matter how you got your music initially, it can be stored in iCloud, and that does not take up your personal iCloud storage. In fact, a lot of these things we've talked about don't take up your personal iCloud storage. Your calendar events, your contacts, your reminders, notes, even your purchased music, movies, and TV shows, they don't take up personal iCloud storage. And so then there's a limit, I think, on the songs. I don't even know what the song limit is now, but it's thousands and thousands of songs that they will match. And even if you got them somewhere outside of Apple, but you bring them into your computer and they'll match them. And then they'll be available in iCloud for all of your devices. And if they can't match them, they'll upload your copy. And so they're still available across all of your devices. And as I said, I don't even know what the number is now of the limit, but it's thousands of songs. And then in addition to all of this, there are some things that do take up your personal iCloud storage. So we'll talk about that in a moment or two. That's things like photos and videos. That's things like your documents that you create. That's things like device backups. We didn't even get into the topic of device backups yet. But another area where iCloud is really important is device backups. And so what happens is it is possible to back up your device to your computer, but I really, really don't recommend that because there's no need, right? Some people maybe not even have a traditional computer. And even if you do, you may not want to take up space with backups when you can just back up to iCloud. The nice part about backing up to iCloud is that it happens wirelessly and automatically. Remember those terms? And so we'll learn about device backups later. But basically, the short version of this is that if you have your device plugged into power, you have it asleep, like the screen is locked, it goes to sleep, it will back up. And now it used to be that you also had to be on Wi-Fi. Now that's not even a requirement. It will back up over cellular as well, as long as you have that setting and that feature enabled. So really the only two absolute caveats are that it be plugged in and that the screen be locked, and then it will back up automatically. You don't even have to worry about it. Now, it is also possible for you to do a manual backup, even if you're not plugged into power and so forth. You can go into settings and do that. But in order to get it to do it automatically, that's all that has to happen. And so these are device backups, backs up everything on your device. If you get a new device for any reason, or when you get a new device, you can restore from that backup. Some of you have done this, and then you don't have to worry about anything. It just re-downloads everything for you and puts it exactly where it was on your other device. So those are device backups. We're still not anywhere close to done. And as I said, I'm not going to be able to go through everything because I'm sure I'll forget stuff, and it's just, but we're not even close yet. The next thing I'll talk about is what Apple calls Apple calls continuity. And continuity is your devices working together. So these are things like, for example, let's say I'm composing an email in the Apple Mail app, which we're going to learn about later on in the course. Or maybe I am creating a document in Pages, or I'm surfing the web. And let's say I'm doing this on my iPad or my Mac. And suddenly I realize, oh, you know what? It's time for me. I'm heading out. That appointment I put on the calendar, that going out to lunch or going to that meeting, whatever. It's time. Somebody's here to pick me up, and I'm not done working on my email. Well, I just literally pick up my iPhone and unlock it. I go to the app switcher, which we already taught you how to go to. and I'll see what's called a handoff badge, which is basically the app represented. And I think on the phone, at least, it will say to you from iPad or from Mac or whatever, and you just double tap on that in our case, because we're voiceover users, or you just tap on it and it will resume. Not only is it opening the same app, but it actually takes you exactly where you left off in the middle of composing that message, right on the same line, or in the Pages document, or on the web, whatever. And you can do that with Safari, with websites. Plus, Safari has what's called iCloud tabs, which means that you don't even have to use handoff in the way I just described. Literally, I can open Safari and see all the open tabs from other devices anytime I want to. So these iCloud tabs, this is continuity with handoff. Another thing that continuity does is it allows, for example, if I get a phone call or a message on my iPhone, I will also get that phone call on my iPad, my Mac, my Apple Watch. And what's more, I can transfer the call between devices. So I'm talking on my iPhone and I think, oh, I want to switch to the iPad. Well, I can just switch to the iPad and now I keep talking right on there. I answer my watch. Let's say I answer the phone on my watch. I get into the car and I say, I really want this to come through the Bluetooth on the car or Apple CarPlay or whatever. I have the car started and now I can transfer the call to my iPhone, to the car, whatever. If I have HomePod devices, I can use my iPhone. I mean, I can do it directly on the HomePods as well, but I can also use my iPhone or iPad to send announcements to everybody in the home with the intercom feature. Those announcements will play on all of the smart speakers, but they will also play, if I want them to, on family members' devices like their iPhones, even if they're in the car or using AirPods. With continuity, of course, I mentioned that we also can, get the same iMessages and text messages on all of our devices. And another thing that we have is, for example, when I am using my Apple TV, which is again, the set-top box, if I have to type, which you're not typing that often on your Apple TV, but sometimes you do. Maybe you want to search for something or enter a login credential. I can actually use my iPhone or my iPad as what's known as a continuity keyboard for my Apple TV. And so that means I can type on my iPad, for example, or my iPhone, and it will enter that text into the Apple TV. And when we learn about passwords here in a little bit, you'll see that I can even share a password automatically from my iPhone to my Apple TV. And I can, if I have let's say a smart keyboard for my iPad, the Magic Keyboard, or I have a Bluetooth keyboard with my iPhone, that keyboard will work then because it's going to be paired to the iPhone, and that iPhone is communicating with the Apple TV. I can use my iPhone to find my Apple TV remote. I can use my watch to find my iPhone. I can use my iPhone to find my watch. I can use my HomePod to find my iPhone. I can use my iPhone to type on my watch. I mean, you get the idea of this, right? I'm deliberately saying it in ways that might make it sound a little crazy, but it's awesome and it's continuity. I mean, it just works. Praise God. And it is. It's a blessing from God. And it really, it's so cool how all of these devices work together. And there's probably numerous ways that they work together that I'm forgetting right now. But I think at least I've given you the idea. Maybe later on here, Cliff or Sarah will have ones that they use that, that I didn't even think about. I know another one that we really don't use it, but there's the Apple Fitness Plus feature where you have these different workouts and you can use the Apple Fitness app on your Apple TV so that you're hearing the music and you're hearing the instructor say what you should be doing and so forth. But at the same time, you're wearing your watch and your watch is keeping track of what activity you're doing. And so it's closing your exercise rings and your, move ring and all these things. And again, all of this stuff is just working together. I can't stress that enough. I know I've said it and I'll probably say it more, but as I say, I really cannot stress it enough. The way that these devices just seamlessly integrate with one another. And you can only do this with a company that is running the entire show, right? Hardware, software, and services together is why this works so brilliantly, and it really does. And so those are just a few of the examples of continuity. Um, there's some other really cool things that we can do. One of the things that we can do is what's called AirDrop. And AirDrop is the ability to share photos and files and other things with people who are really close to you, like within the same house, within the same room, physically close, I mean. You can always use messages and mail and so forth, but with AirDrop, you'd be in the same room and share your photo with somebody that's near you, or you can even bring your phones together and share your contact information just by like bringing the tops of your phones together. I can transfer money. So I went out to lunch today, and there's this brand new Mexican restaurant that just opened in our area yesterday. And the food was delicious. It was a really good experience. Praise God. We went there today, tried out excellent food. But this place just opened, and they were having some delays. I'm going somewhere with this. Why is he telling this story? I'm going somewhere with this. They, um, we'll weave it together. They had this soft opening, right? It wasn't the grand opening yet because they've been waiting for like their liquor license approval and all this, but they've been advertising this restaurant for a year and a half, and people got tired of waiting. So they decided they're going to open even a little bit before everything was quite ready. Well, one of the things that wasn't ready yet was their credit card system, but I didn't know that. So we get there today, and my friend who I went to lunch with, Fred, he says to me, "It says cash only." And I looked at him and I said, "Do you have cash?" He said, "Actually, I do." He said, "I have cash with me." I said, "All right, I'll pay you back with Apple Pay. Um, we'll order and eat, and you pay, and then I'll pay you back." So that's what we did. And so when we got home, when we got back to the house here in the car after eating, I said, "Okay, I'm going to send you this money." So I pull out my phone, I open the Apple Wallet app, and I can go in there and I can designate how much money I want to send. And I actually can bring my phone right up beside my friend's phone. We just literally hold our two phones together for a few seconds, and I had already given my approval. Like I had to do Face ID and stuff first, right? It's not like you're going to accidentally send somebody your bank account, right? You have to give, explicit approval. But I had already done that. I typed in what I wanted to send, and it had me do my authentication process with Face ID and everything. And then it said, okay, now, so I bring my phone up to Fred's phone. We hold the tops of our phones together. And in just a few seconds, it had sent him the money. I didn't have to do anything else. I mean, this is so cool. These are, peer-to-peer types of things, AirDrop and tap to cash and name drop, where we can, bring our phones together to share our contact info. And then there's a feature called Mail Drop, which for those of you who are familiar with some of those services like Adobe Send Now and so on, these are like, you can send large files by mail because they get uploaded to the cloud and then you download them, those kinds of things. So all of that is part of iCloud as well. We also have iCloud Mail itself, which I haven't talked about. I mentioned that you can get an iCloud email address and use iCloud Mail, but I didn't really go into it any more than that. But iCloud.com email is, in my opinion, the absolute best. There's so many features with this. There's so many things we can do with it that really and truly, I wouldn't. I mean, I have a Comcast email address because I am a very happy Xfinity customer. And so I do use that as well. And I've allowed that to remain my primary Apple ID, Apple account email, because I just don't have any reason to change it. But really and truly, the one I use more than any is iCloud. I also have a Google email, gmail.com, but the only reason I have that is because you have to have it in order to have a YouTube account, because YouTube is owned by Google. And so, or maybe it's Alphabet, the parent company, but whatever. But I have to, do that. So I have a Gmail account, but the iCloud is by far what I use the most. And it's great. It works, of course, on all of my devices. And then what I have is I have what they call alias email addresses. So that means you get your Apple account email address or your iCloud email, whatever, and you can have 3 additional email addresses underneath that. that come to the same inbox, but people can actually send to these other email addresses. And then not only that, but you can have what they call domain email. So that means I can have my own domain and people send to that, like ttjtech.biz, for example. And it uses iCloud and it goes to my iCloud inbox. And you can either set it up to work with an existing domain that you own, or you can actually purchase a domain right from your Apple Mail settings through a company called Cloudflare that they work together, and they're very inexpensive. I have a domain, and I think I pay maybe $8 a year or something for that domain. It's crazy how inexpensive it is, and so you can have multiple domains, and you can do all of these things together. And the other part of this is what's known as iCloud Plus, which gives you additional features, right? And so that's part of that. We when we talk about iCloud Plus now, there's some additional features for email. For example, the domain feature, I think, might require iCloud Plus. I don't remember. Maybe Trainer Cliff will interject later whether it does or doesn't, but I think you have to have iCloud Plus. But you definitely get some other features with iCloud Plus. And one of them that you get is a private relay feature. It kind of works like a VPN, for those who know what that is. Keeps your information private when you're on public networks and so on. And there's so many little things like that. And there's so many security features that iCloud includes, even without iCloud Plus, right? There's mail privacy protection so that people can't tell when you open their email if it's a scam or something. And then there's the other feature that is hide my email. It lets you generate random email addresses to use. They still come to your inbox, but you maybe don't want to give, because you're not sure if it's a scam or something. So you don't want to give somebody your actual email address. So you give them it generates this fake one, and not fake. I mean, it's an alias is what it is. But it generates this random email address, and you can use that with that particular account or that particular person. And if it turns out that it was a scam or something, or you just don't want to receive email anymore, you can just turn off that email address, and it's that simple. And of course, there's the passwords feature, which we used to call keychain. That's what Apple used to call this. But now there's an actual passwords app, but it's all iCloud, right? So from the ground up, it's syncing all of so you store your login credentials, your email address, usernames, and passwords for different websites and apps. You can store your Wi-Fi passwords. You can store all kinds of other stuff I won't get into right now because of the fact that this is just an overview today. We'll do it later in a different class, but you can store several other kinds of things in the passwords app as well. And again, they're automatically synced across all devices. They can be shared when it's appropriate to do that. You can have different groups for your passwords. And what's more, they will be auto-filled, which is probably the most important part other than the syncing, which means that, when you get to a website, you just say fill password, you authenticate with your Face ID or your Touch ID, and it will automatically fill those passwords for you. This is an iCloud feature. And then we also have iCloud Drive. Now, iCloud Drive is part of the whole iCloud system. And we already referenced it a little bit because I mentioned to you that when you create documents in Pages, for example, that's what I used as an example, but it applies to many other things as well. You can choose to save them to iCloud Drive automatically, and then they are available on all of your devices. And that's really, really cool. But iCloud Drive actually gives you a cloud storage area that you can just, even beyond that, you can create your own folders. You can put your own files there. And then again, they are available on all of your devices. So I even have my downloads folder in iCloud because that's a choice that you can do that. And so when I download something on one iPad, it's available on my other iPad, my phone, my Mac. If I download something you get the idea. So it's across the board, and it really just works. And so iCloud Drive is an actual storage location. You can use it like any other drive, add folders, copy and paste, do all these things. We're going to teach you how to do it later on in this course, but praise God, and it's amazing. And so you can use iCloud Drive in that way. And then iCloud also integrates with third-party apps. And so, that makes things even more exciting because your third-party apps, whatever they may be, they can choose to integrate iCloud so that what you do in one device is available on another. And we have so many apps, right? The recipe app that I use. And then not only does this enable the syncing across devices, but again, I mentioned earlier that it also enables collaboration. And I said that was going to be the last thing, but there is one more thing. And I just realized the significance of what I said because Steve Jobs always said that. And I promise I was not intending to say it that way on purpose. But there is. But let me just finish that one first, though, that the collaborative part of iCloud is so important as well, because you can collaborate on almost anything. So there are certain apps that have collaboration built in from the ground up, right? Like Pages, Keynote, Numbers, GarageBand, what's the Notes app, right? These apps have built-in collaboration, but really and truly, you can share just about any file or folder. You can make it a private share where it's just the people you designate. You can make it a public share where there's a link to it that anybody can access. And then you can decide, well, since anybody can access it, I want to make it read only instead of just being, you can actually do that regardless, but you can decide, are other people allowed to make changes, or they only just read and access the stuff. And you can do that on a per person basis when you do a private share as well. So that's very important, collaboration. And when the apps support it, like the Pages and Notes app do, that's actually real-time collaboration. There are often times that my mom and I, because she is a sort of a design partner for me when we have to do visual stuff, maybe website design and things of that nature. But even when I'm working on a document where the design really matters, I'll bring her into the loop and just say, will you look at this and make sure it looks okay? Do I have the formatting the way you think it should be? Does the font look good? What would it look like if I made this yellow or red instead of, and so she would look at these things, but she can collaborate, which means that if she notices something, oh, you spelled that word wrong up there. And I'll say, well, Mom, you're closer to it. Do you mind just fixing it? So she'll fix it, and VoiceOver will tell me, Catherine is typing or whatever it says. It lets me know, and we can see where each other's cursors are, jump to the other person. So this is real time collaboration, and that really is made possible by the iCloud features and architecture, I suppose you'd say, as well. So that's another important part of that. Now, the one more thing that I said I wanted to talk to you about before we go to the other instructors and the questions is that there is another important part of this, which is the family sharing component. And so if you have family that lives with you, or, your kids or whatever, I suppose, even if they're not, living at home anymore, you can do a family share. I think you can have up to 6 people in a family share group. And the way that this functions is that each person in the family does indeed have his or her own Apple account. And that is that person's primary means of accessing all the Apple stuff. But then the best parts of that, the parts that where it really matters to share things, are shareable. So when we have a family share group, we've got one for my wife, my son, my daughter, and me. And the 4 of us have this family share group. I'm what's called the family organizer. I'm the one that created the family share. And so I'm the family organizer. And then each of the family members is in this group. And so, for example, we have a family calendar, right? So it isn't that we necessarily want to share every single thing on our calendars, because my wife doesn't need to have my work schedule during the day when she's at work. That doesn't, and I don't need to have hers. It doesn't really matter. But then there's a lot of stuff we do together with the whole family, the kids, anything as simple as going to, one of the kids' soccer games or musical, or, a certain, whatever, you get the idea. Well, that is then able to be put on the family calendar. So when we learn about calendars in here in a couple of weeks, I think that's slated for 2 or 3 weeks from now, maybe, we're going to show you how to change what calendar things go on, right? And so maybe you want it on the home calendar or the work calendar, which is just for you and all of your devices. But maybe you don't. Maybe you want it on the family calendar so that it's on everybody's devices. Everybody can see that, and you're notified when somebody adds to it. And the same thing is true with the Reminders app. And the Reminders app and the Calendar app actually now have some degree of integration with each other. But the Reminders app has its own shared list as well. So you get a family reminders list. You can create other lists and share them with the family as well, or with even other people outside the family. But the whole idea of this is that, if we have a family reminders list, and maybe we're doing spring cleaning, because we do a big spring cleaning every spring, and that's one of the times we use this pretty extensively. And what we'll do is you can actually even assign reminders to different people. You can assign tasks to different people. But we use, or maybe we use notes for that, because I'll explain that one in a second. But I tell you what we definitely do is we do a shared grocery list in the Reminders app, for the whole family. And again, each person can see when someone has added something to the grocery list. So it's not just about sharing it with the family, although that's really awesome, and praise God. And that's the key part of it, probably the most important part, right? So everybody's got that list. We get to the store and I can say to my daughter, go ahead and pull out your phone and you can, help us shop. But also, you could be in the store and you know, your kids say, hey, I want you to get cookies while you're there. They just add it to the list and it shows up as a notification. They added that to the list, and there you go. So we can see each other's reminders. We have a family photo album, and we also now have a shared library in the Photos app, which means that if we take pictures or videos that include the family, they should automatically, it's a setting you can turn on or off, but they can automatically go to the shared library, and you can manually move things to the shared library so that everybody in the family can access the photos and videos that are relevant to the whole family. And then, in addition to all of that, we can share music, we can share app store purchases and subscriptions in most cases, and we can even share books and uh, movies and TV shows that are purchased and so forth, audiobooks, and other things that we, as I say, apps and so forth that we purchase. They can be shared among members and with members of the family. And finally, we share the iCloud storage. Remember, I talked about iCloud storage and iCloud Drive and all these things. We can share that. But I want to be very, very clear. We're not actually accessing each other's stuff. I've had students over the years who, when they hear that, they think, well, I don't want to share that because I don't want someone else in the family accessing my data. No, that's not the way it works. You each have only access to your own data. You're not going to find a family member's folder on there that you can just go in and it's not like that. Everybody has their own. It's unique to that person's Apple account, but it's just that the amount of storage can be shared across the board so that each person doesn't have to pay for storage. Now you say, what do you mean pay for storage? Well, all the iCloud services, for the most part, are completely free, but you can pay for iCloud Plus. You can include iCloud storage, iCloud Plus in some of these other bundles that Apple has, which are really good. They call them Apple One. Like you get Apple Music, Apple Arcade, Apple News Plus, Apple TV Plus, all these different services bundled into one, and they'll have certain amounts of iCloud storage. If you pay nothing to Apple, if you pay absolutely nothing, you get, I think it's still 5 GB. Maybe they increased it, but I think it's still 5. Again, Cliff or Sarah might be able to jump in and correct me if I'm wrong. But for the longest time, it was 5 GB of free iCloud storage. And then if you want to upgrade that, there are so many options. You can pay as little as $1 a month, 99 cents a month. And I think that gives you 50 GB. That's a huge increase, right? That's a lot more storage than your 5 GB. And that's a good option for a lot of people. If you have very high demands on your storage, you can get 2 TB, 4 TB, I think 6 or 12 terabytes you can go all the way up to, if I'm not mistaken. And these are just monthly fees that you can pay. And so there's a lot of storage options that you can get for all of your iCloud contents and all of the things you see. I use iCloud Drive almost exclusively, right? I mean, some things you can't. Some things are stored locally, and that's beyond your control. It's the way the app is designed for any one of a number of reasons, right? But anytime that it is possible to do so, I use iCloud for storage. That way, I know that everything is available no matter which device that I might happen to pick up. And so my family and I have 4 terabytes of storage right now. I think we still have about 3 left. So we're fine for now. My daughter actually asked me about this the other day. She was starting to get concerned because she happened to be looking in her settings at something. And she said to me, she said, you know that you're using, and I forget what percent she said, but it was the highest in the family. And I said, well, yeah, babe, I probably am because I do the most stuff with this. I said, but you don't have anything to worry about because we still have like 3 terabytes left. And I said, if we get below 2 terabytes, I'll probably pay more to upgrade that storage to 6 or even 12 if I need to. So I said, you don't have anything to worry about, but we can see, how much storage we're using and we can manage that. And I think, as I said, that's the majority of what I wanted to share about iCloud, other than just to say, this is what you're going to do when you sign into your new device, and you can check out your settings. And this is so important. Between now and next week, you can check this out and play with it. And if you're not signed in, go ahead and sign in or create an account if you have to. And then also make sure all of these things are turned on, right? Your iCloud, mail and calendars and contacts and photos and everything. And even the Find My option, which allows you, as I said, to find your devices and play a sound on them and so forth. Remember, I said I can use my watch to find my iPhone. I can, all those things. I can find other people's in the family too. And all of this can be done by going to settings and then tapping on iCloud near the bottom of the screen, or you can start out by going to settings and tapping on your name near the top. If your name is not listed near the top, that means you're probably not signed in. Instead, it will say sign into Apple or sign into your Apple account. So there you go. Then, I either need to create an account or I need to sign in with one. So if we want to call it homework, I mean, it's not really, we don't actually check your homework or anything. But if we want to call it quote unquote homework, that would be it for next week. I would encourage you all to make sure you're signed into iCloud, make sure all the features that you want are turned on. I recommend that you have all of them turned on. But that's a good place to start.
I have a question about VPN, and I was wondering if you could explain it a little bit. I'm told that for my upcoming in the future guide dog training that I'm advised to have VPN on my phone. And
I'm going to oversimplify it, but essentially it's a way of routing your data in such a way that it's not associated with your actual device and your actual location. And the reason they advise this for when you're not in your home, like you mentioned, when you're traveling to the guide dog training, is because you don't always know whether you can trust other people's Wi-Fi networks. Maybe they don't have their network as secure as it should be, and then maybe there's some bad actor who's trying to steal somebody's data or something, and a lot of things have to conspire for that to actually happen. But it's just that that VPN is a precaution, and it makes your device more secure when you're away from home by the way that it routes the data so that it isn't really associated directly with you. Other people also use VPNs to do some weird stuff, and I'm not sure personally of the legality of it. But like, for example, maybe there's certain TV content that's only available in the US, but somebody lives in Canada or Australia and they want to watch it. So they can actually set their VPN to look like it's in the US, and then they can watch that content. As I said, I have to question the legality of it, but I'm not here to judge, but people, that's another reason people use VPN. It's just a protection. And if you want, now there's a couple options you have. Safari, now there is a feature, if you have iCloud Plus, if you're an iCloud Plus subscriber, you can use the private relay feature of Safari. which really, in a lot of ways, is a VPN. And it functions a lot like a VPN. And so it's pretty much limited to Safari, not necessarily your other apps. But it would, if you're already an iCloud Plus subscriber, it would definitely cover at least the Safari part of that, and then you don't have to pay, anything extra for that. If you are looking for other options, one of the ones that seems to be very, very highly respected is ExpressVPN. A lot of people use that. You can download the ExpressVPN app from the App Store. You can sign into it and enable the protection. And I think it even gives you a free trial. So maybe you don't even ever need to pay. Maybe you use it just while you're, at the training.
Okay.
I do think that their licenses come with multiple device support. So if you have, 3 or 4 devices, you can install it on more than one. And I think with things like ExpressVPN, you can just go into the settings and disable it at any time. So every once in a great while, you will run into a website that won't function properly because you're using a VPN. But if you just then disable it, then that will solve the problem. Thanks everybody for joining, and God bless you. Remember, if you want to come in on Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern, we will have Saturdays with Stir It Up. Have a great rest of your week and a great weekend. See you next time. Bye. Take care.
Thanks for joining today's session. Didn't get your question answered? Have an additional comment or feedback? Email us info@ttjtech.biz or info@stiritup.com. And remember, stir is spelled with a U. That's STURITUP.com. Or check out our websites for additional resources. That's ttjtech.biz or stiritup.com. And remember, subscribe to the newsletter when you're there. That way, you don't miss out on any upcoming announcements or events. Thanks for joining us. God bless, and see you next time.